Okay. All right. Hey everyone, welcome to my first cheap lens review, and today the lens we are reviewing is the legendary Helios 44-2. This is not only one of my favorite cheap lenses of all time, it is one of my favorite just lenses in general to use for video of all time. I always have this lens in my camera bag, always. And before I get into why I always have it in my camera bag, I want to get into a little bit of history and the specs of this lens, just so you know what to expect. So this is an older lens. I believe this model is from the 70s or 80s. It was made by a company called Zenit, which was a Russian lens company, or a Russian camera company, I should say, that existed during the time of the Soviet Union. And this lens specifically, I believe, was originally supposed to be kind of a copycat of a Zeiss lens that was very popular in America. And they copied the blueprint and everything, but there were a few quirks that this lens had that were unexpected, and it is because of these kind of unexpected little quirks that it has such a cult following now in the modern day. This lens has a 58mm focal length and an aperture that opens all the way up to f2. The aperture is really peculiar on this lens. It's on the front of the lens instead of on the back. So if you want to rotate the aperture ring, you have to like turn this little ring on the front here. It also has an aperture lock, which is nice if you don't want it to move. The aperture ring is clickless, which is great for video. But again, if you don't want it to move at all, you can just set the lock on whatever focal length and it will stay there. So let's talk about some of the quirks with this lens if you choose to buy it. Probably what it is most famous for is when you open up the aperture all the way to f2, you get Swirly Bokeh in the background of your image, which is kind of atypical and creates a very unique and sort of fantastical look. I've used this feature for like fantasy short films in the past that I've made. And I've used it for just things that, like, when I'm trying to create like a dreamlike quality, I use this lens specifically for that. The Swirly Bokeh feature is probably the most well-known and most popular feature of this lens, and I think for that reason people kind of have the mindset that this lens is really just kind of a one-trick pony, that you really only get this lens for that specific feature, for when you want something really dreamlike in your film. And while it could be used just for this, I think it's a little more versatile than that. Something that, if you use vintage lenses a lot, something that people talk about quite a bit is how soft they are. And this isn't really a good thing or a bad thing, it just is. It's just a fact that if you're using vintage lenses, most of the time, these lenses are going to be a little bit softer than like the modern sharp glass that we have. And while that is true, and that is still true of the Helios 44-2, I found that if you stop down on this lens just a little bit, right around f4 and up, you get a really rich contrast and you get a much sharper image, sharper than I've really gotten with any other vintage lens, I think, that I've ever used. And for this reason, it's been a little bit more versatile for me than I thought it would be. I use this lens a ton on short films. I've used it on some client work, actually, if there's a little bit more room for like a cinematic feel. And just the way that light bounces around inside this lens, I think, makes it worth having right away, and especially when you consider the price of this lens. I got this lens a long time ago. I can't remember exactly what I got it for. I think it was around 50 bucks. And that is on the more expensive end of what I would pay for this lens. If you are paying more than like 50, 60 bucks for this, I think you're getting kind of ripped off. It's one of the most mass-produced lenses ever made. And there are so many copies of this thing just floating around the world. I've seen it go for as cheap as 20 bucks, if you know where to look. If you do get it, you're going to have to get a ring adapter to adapt it to whatever system you're using. I have this handy dandy M42 to EOS adapter. I shoot on Canon EF lenses a lot. Right now I'm shooting on my ACAM, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, and I have the Metabones Ultra Speed Booster with that. And I use that for basically everything. So For this lens in particular, I have it adapted to Canon EF. They're really cheap. You can get them for like 15 bucks. Something you're going to have to keep in mind whenever you're shopping for any vintage lenses, not just this lens, is the condition that it is in. It is not uncommon for vintage lenses to have some fungal growth inside, which can be kind of gross and can ruin your image. It's also not uncommon for them to be pretty beat up and not in the best condition always. So you're going to want to either contact your seller or use a site that you trust quite a bit and find out exactly what condition your lens is in. Mine is a little beat up. I think mine shipped from Russia when I ordered it, and when I got it, it looked like it had been shipped through a war zone. It's pretty beat up. It has always looked pretty beat up. I've had to do some minor upkeep and repairs on it over the years. I've had to tighten some screws down, make sure things are, you know, as good as they can be. I think there is a little bit of dust inside it, but I kind of like this. It gives the lens a little bit of character. You might not want that though. So definitely make sure that it is as high quality as you can get it when you are ordering this lens online. Aside from that, that's really it. I personally don't think you can go wrong with this lens. It's not perfect for all projects. Definitely if you're wanting something with a very kind of clean clinical feel, if you're doing a video for a client who's like a hospital or a school or something very corporate and very clean and professional with very bright lighting, I wouldn't recommend bringing this lens along. But if you want something with a bit more of a rugged, aged film look, this is the perfect lens for you. If you guys like what I'm doing here, please like this video, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Do you have this lens? What are your opinions of it? I would love to hear from you. If you like this channel, please subscribe, hit the bell to get all notifications, and I'll see you next time.